They are still mad that I'm not. All right, so we're in the home stretch. We're in the home stretch, and so I want to say thank you so much for participating at the level you have. I hope so far that there's been at least one thing that you've been able to grasp from my presentation, or has made you think differently. So one of the things that I think is really important, that we understand that people are doing the best they can with what they have, even when it's inadequate, but they're doing the best that they can. And so when we talk about those who are being bigoted or prejudiced, what we understand about those individuals is that even in their bigotry, guess what they're striving for? Significance, belonging, and safety. In their prejudice or their prejudicial thinking, what are they striving for? Significance, belonging, and safety. And so what happens, or when it becomes a lot easier to deal and work with those folks, when we understand that they are striving for the same things that what? We are. Right? And I have to tell you that it's when we get so high and mighty that we actually start losing these individuals. All right? How many people will consider themselves a good person? Raise your hand if you're a good person. However you whatever your standard is. Okay, cool. So we'll come back to that good person thing in just a bit. I do want to tell you why we have the opportunity, or what gives us the backbone to even have these diversity conversations. And I would also, I'm submitting a lot of things to you to think about and to take with you. And this will be another one. I would be cautious if you invite any diversity speaker, cultural competence speaker, sensitivity speaker to come in and they do not mention the tool that gives them, or the platform that gives them the right to speak. And what do you think that platform is that gives me the authority to even have this conversation with you? The Constitution of the United States. In the preamble, what do we say in the preamble? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, and we mean men, the humankind, are created equal, right? And that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right? What also gives me backbone, or gives me the teeth in what I do, is understanding that there was a piece of paper that was signed in 1964 that gave certain people rights that didn't have rights before. Which was what? What was signed in 1964? The Civil Rights Act, right? And I also know that in 1991 there was another act that was signed that gave people access to our buildings and public accommodations that did not have it before, which was the what? The ADA Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so what I would encourage you to do, please raise your hand if you fight for justice, if you believe that justice is something that everyone should have. Raise your hand, be proud, all right? What I would encourage you to do is to read those documents. Just Google them. You don't have to have a comprehensive understanding or a law degree to understand them. But if you say you fight for justice, you need to know what tools are at your disposal, right? Because you might bring a knife to a gunfight, right? And a lot of people who oppose liberty and justice and the security of people to have quality lives, they're using different weapons than we are. And then we say they're not playing fair when they're just reading the Monopoly rules. How many people play by the Monopoly rules? All right, so there's that. And so the 64 Civil Rights Act is important. And actually I put the wrong date for the ADA. That was 2001 was some kind of building addition, but the original act was in 1991. All right, and then there was an update in 2010. So there's that. So we have that, significance, belonging, and safety. Oh, I know. We're going to go back to the latest. To the latest. So in this picture, it is clear that people are acting within a cultural context, right? They are behaving this way. Why? Why are the guys behaving this way?
She's different.
She's different?
It's expected.
It's expected. It's tolerated. It's allowed, right? So this level of disrespect was allowed and tolerated. However, the levels of respect that we need to have changed, and our requirement for those have changed. And so on your table, there should be a card that says, respect and 5 reasons we can't get it. All right, does everyone have a card? Okay. Anyone else need a card? There may be some extra cards at your table. If you could pass those to comrades, that would be great. All right. So what's going on in this picture? What do you see in the picture? What do you see in the picture? A very sad little boy. What else is? Go ahead.
Hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy. All right, so you see a bad example, hypocrisy. All right, so let's talk about the 5 reasons that we don't get respect. Because I oftentimes, Rodney Dangerfield made a whole career out of not getting respect, right? Or not getting any respect. I can't remember any of his jokes, but I just remember his jokes. And so one of the reasons that we don't get respect is that we tell people, do as I say, not as I do, right? So we go right back to that hypocrisy, that I don't have to, but you do have to kind of mentality. And when we act like that in the workplace, how do subordinates respond to that? They typically don't, right? Or if they do, they don't respond well to that. Because if it actually is good enough for me, then it should be good enough for you as well, right? We'll get back to number 2. We'll use that as our closing point on this card. The other reason that we typically don't give respect to people is because they say, boys will be boys, or this is how it's always been, right? Right now I'm working with my HR department because we give tests to people as to enter into employment with us. But I had a question. Does this test actually measure what you need on the job? And guess what? When I asked the question, guess what somebody's response was? I don't know. That's problematic. Right? If anybody should know, it should be us who knows. Right? And so that's a process that we've carried on for a long time. And in many cases, the tests probably do. But the fact that as administrators, we're not clear about that can be problematic. And I believe that many of the things, we don't do any empty work, but I think that if we don't know, then that can be problematic, right? The next is that people will say that respect or that acting out on something is not my responsibility. It's somebody else's child. Somebody else will do it. It does not have to be me. But what do we know about giving someone else accountability for our stuff? They typically don't care as much about it as we do, right? Have you ever gotten on an elevator and just waited to see if somebody would punch your floor? Right. Well, in our buildings, we don't have a lot of floors, so it's not that complicated. But it would take a long time if we waited on someone else to take accountability for something that we could do ourselves, right? The last reason that we don't get respect, or reason number 5, and we'll go back to number 2 in just a second, is that we don't see that disrespect is violence, right? So when physical violence is impacted on a person, What is the emotional residue that's left over after that act of violence? What's that?
Anger.
Anger is one of those things. What else? Pain is one of those things. What else? Shame. Embarrassment. Resentment. Right? What happens when an individual has been disrespected? What is the emotional residue then? I would say it's the same thing. I would say that it's the same thing. And so when I started thinking about, the kind of person that I want to be, do I want to be a violent person? And then I started thinking about ways in which I disrespect people, that I'm actually causing violence. And it gave me, I had to pause for a second and really think about how I was operating in the world, right? When I'm being disrespectful to school buses who are trying to pick up and drop off kids by not being patient and trying to drive around, or not being patient by giving them ample space, that is a form of violence. When somebody cuts me off and I act a fool, I am engaging in an act of violence. Even though they were, and this sounds very childish, they did it first. Right? But that disrespect is a form of violence. And then lastly, one of the reasons that we don't get respect is that we say to people, or have you ever heard someone say, you have to earn my respect? Have you heard that? Someone say that? Right? That is the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard in my life. It's laughable. It's impossible. And I learned that at an early age. Right? So here I am, 9 years old in my dad's church, and there was a girl who was in our youth group. Her name was Ruthie Furlow. Ruthie was 13, because I like older women. So here I am, 9, Ruthie is 13, and I'm always trying to get Ruthie's attention. And so one day I captured her eye, right? And she said, Andre, come here. And she said, Andre, if you like me, you'll do A, B, and C. So what did I do? I went and did it. I did A, B, and C. I came back with the newspaper in my mouth. And she said, Andre, if you really, really like me, you'll do X, Y, Z. So, what do you think I did? I accomplished that task too. So I'm coming back, and now I'm like, and she says, Andre, if you really, really like me, you'll do 1, 2, 3. And what do you think I did? I ran as far away from Ruthie as I possibly could. Because it became clear that what? No matter what I did to win her, I was not going to do it. It was not going to happen. And a lot of times respect is the same way. We say, I want this level of respect, but as people get closer to that, we change it, or it's different for different people. And I'll never forget this lesson that I learned from my students. So my students were a bit antisocial, as most teenagers kind of are, right? So that, the outside world is a threat to them in so many different ways. And so they build up these tools and these scabs and these shields to protect themselves from the outside world, which typically kind of looks to, as to adults as if they're, being antisocial. But the world out there really, as Michael Jackson would say, doesn't care about us, right? And so they have this whole worldview. And so I'm working with the kids, and I'm teaching them social skills and how to shake hands and make positive eye contact, because they're used to eye contact being something they call mean mugging, right? You look too long at me, that means we're about to fight, get down, right? All that kind of of stuff, right? Mean mugging. And so I'm teaching them all these great social behaviors. And so I said, as a project, we're going to do a service learning project for the community. And so we want to survey the community to find out what the needs are, because that's what we do when we're in bureaucracies, right? So we go out and we survey and we get information to help us make our decisions. And so I send my kids out and they have t-shirts that have the name of the school on